You know what's really annoying?
Mm.
So my copy of this book is messed up. I don't know if it's just my copy or this run in general, and other people have the same problem, but random pages are printed really weird, and a lot of the pages are like there's too much of a space in the middle.
Printer errors in
I
general.
don't know if it's a printer error or a binding error.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the process to know, but it is an error. And so now sometimes, since there's more room on the inner corner,
you
I
have,
write notes in that side.
Yeah.
That means whenever I flip through preemptively to see how much I have thoughts, because some chapters I have a lot of thoughts, some I only have a few that absolutely need to be shared. But when I flip through, I go, oh, I didn't really think of much this time. And then we'll be in the middle of a podcast. I'll be like, I totally forgot I had thoughts about this. And it's annoying. And you'd think that would mean 29 chapters in, I would start writing on the other side. No, I'm still going to put it in the middle. There's more space there. I can do double sentences instead of one.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week we're discussing Bingtown Convergence, chapter 29.
29?
We start with Serilla.
Mm-hmm.
So we go back to Serilla and kind of get our thoughts on things. Remember, we had talked about last chapter that time has passed. So time has indeed passed for Serilla as well.
Yes.
She is still in the satrap's cabin and kind of running the show there.
And just to know on our end, do we know how long this journey has taken? Is this like 2 months long? 3 months?
Something like that.
All of
months. Couple months maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because I feel like
we probably get a good estimate from Wintrow's point of view when he first goes from Bingtown to Jamelia, and I think it's a month or two.
Okay.
But I don't remember exactly.
Because I was thinking, I feel like there's been 2 of those in-chapter season changes that Hobb does since they've been on the boat, but it could have only been 1. Either way, I think it's safe to say more than a month, right?
Yeah.
This will become important in a page and a half, so just why I'm setting that tone.
So Serilla is thinking about and describes that other ships have joined them on the way, and she's kind of wondering how this all happened, how it was all planned, because more Chalcedean ships are joining them. How long had this all been in planning? Did anyone in Jamelia know this show of force accompanied the satrap as he descended upon Bingtown? She was now almost sure that the satrap would be sacrificed to justify a Chalcedean attack on Bingtown. She clutched that morsel of knowledge to herself as if it were a gold nugget. To warn the old traders might be her surest way of buying their trust of her. If she had any loyalties left, they now belonged to the wondrous place she had studied for years. So that's a little bit of insight to kind of how she's thinking. One, that she's still trying to gain as much upper hand and leverage as possible because her survival is reliant upon that.
Right. 2,
still incredibly naive and hopeful about Bingtown because that's her only light at the end of the corridor kind of thing, right? It's this wondrous magical place that's going to fix all of her problems if she can convince them.
Right. And I find it very interesting, her idyllic version of Bingtown, mostly because it gives the impression that she has never been around groups of people before.
Yeah,
which
kinda.
I guess she's a scholar technically, right? Not that I'm saying scholars don't go near people, but her role,
companion, yeah, she probably stayed mostly in the palace or the palace grounds.
So it just, because I say that because I think it's natural for groups to, sure, they may share a common goal, but
to fracture into little
subgroups. It just, I think, is human nature. And so the fact that she doesn't even have a worry about this happening, or even the fact that they're known for their loyalties and they've given their word, and there's no way some of the Bingtown traders would be thinking about going back on their word. And of course they're going to hold her in high regard because they obviously hold strong loyalty to Jamelia without really taking into consideration how bad things would have gotten for them
Mm-hmm.
and how different the just society is at the moment. I just find it very naive, like you said.
She does imply in here that she understands that they might not have the most trust in her immediately, and that's why she would
Right.
have to buy their trust with that knowledge. But yeah, I agree with you. It's still a very idyllic way of looking at things.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it just really stuck out to me this chapter. I've thought it a couple times, but it wasn't a strong enough thing. And now maybe it sticks out more because we know that it doesn't go the way that she has planned.
Mm-hmm. And they're much more fractured, and she tries too hard at certain things.
Yeah. And I think it also just made me feel really sorry for her because clearly this is a reaction to what has happened on this ship.
Yeah.
And I think I would feel bad for her even if nothing horrible had happened on this ship because I think she has so much faith in Bingtown. She has romanticized the Bingtown traders and Bingtown in general to the point where it can never live up to the expectations.
It's an exotic place that she has studied for a long time that has a homogenous views on everything, right? In her mind.
Right. So I think that is already a little bit something that I pity. I don't know if pity is the right word, but I feel bad that she
gonna get a reality check.
Yeah, because like I don't know, I feel bad whenever people have a strong interest in something and it doesn't live up to the hype. And so I don't know, I think it's even worse now because of how much you can kind of tell that she's gripping onto that fantasy for reasons of horrible things having happened to her, of like, it has to be better and it will be better and it's going to go great because I won't be here. And I think that makes it more sympathetic.
Speaking of horrible things happening, she's called away because a sailor comes and says, hey, the satrap wants to come out too. And she's like, well, his health is too delicate. And remember, she's the one who's kind of keeping him in delicate health at the moment.
Yes.
But she's thinking about how she can't seem like she's gaining too much control or power because the captain is still on board, obviously. And she is still terrified of him.
Right.
And can't even muster up any hatred or other strong emotion besides that terror. And so she just kind of is moving around him at the moment and gaining what she can. So she goes to the satrap's chambers, as she is called.
Right. No, it is a really sad reminder of what has happened. And she is really trying to muster up that hate of anything would be better than being this afraid of the captain. And though I think what makes it worse is that he doesn't care and also finds it funny and has like laughed in her face at her scared reaction. So that just makes it worse. It's just not a good situation. Again, we can see why she's idealizing when she's going to meet the Bingtown traders. Right. But as she goes back to the room, she notices that everything is clean, put in place, which is a stark contrast to the last time she entered the satrap's chambers with us. And she notes that the cleaning people have been there and done their job, and it makes it just much more enjoyable for her. She also mentions there's a platter of sliced meat and a pudding of steamed fruit and several flats of unleavened bread to accompany it. There's also red wine and simple food. I wanted to specifically bring this up because they have been traveling, like I said at the beginning, a month or more. Where is this sliced meat coming from? Where is all this food coming from? Because on all the other ships, I think there have been multiple mentions of how tired you get of eating on ship because there's no good food. It just doesn't store well. You eat the ship tack. Even the captain doesn't really get frivolous meals all the time. And this feels like a regular occurrence, the way she's explaining it.
Well, one, this is the satrap, so they're going to give them, bring on all the foods that they can. Two, you salt the meats, right? Salt is a preservative, and that's fairly common in the past. So it's probably just heavily salted, and then the cook heats it up or something and has, I don't know, maybe like a sauce with it or something.
Right.
So that's what I'm assuming. It just specifically brought on for this pleasure cruise kind of thing because In other scenarios that we've been in, they're traders, so they need cargo
Mm,
hold. They need space for that, and they can't bring barrels of preserved delicacies,
fair
as
enough.
Serilla goes into later.
Right.
Um, so I'm assuming it's just something like that, where the extra space can be taken up with whatever the satrap wanted brought along.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point, I guess. So yeah, and she also does mention that
She's not taking risks.
she isn't taking risks. So before, when we were with this crew, a lot of people were getting sick and one person even died. And it was only the people that were part of the satrap's party that were
Mhm.
eating his food. So the satrap thought that he was being poisoned. However, Serilla doesn't think that's the case. She thinks that the food has gone bad because he has so many weird delicacies, and there's just no way that it's staying shelf safe in the belly of a ship. So this meal that was described is more of a simple meal in comparison to what everybody else was eating before, and she has not gotten sick and neither has the rest of the crew. So she's pretty confident that it
Mhm.
wasn't any ill intention, it was just
Yeah.
spoiled food. Which is gross that they wouldn't have noticed that it was spoiled. But I guess they had a lot of pleasure herbs.
There's also on a smaller tray the satrap's meal, so she's also kind of ordering and providing food for the satrap in his sickness, quote unquote. So it's just like mashed stuff, some bread and broth that is going to be, the bread's going to be soaked in the broth and it's going to be all mushy. Just stuff to feed someone who's basically on their deathbed or can't chew.
Steamed onions and turnips mashed together. If
Yummy.
I'm being honest,
Doesn't sound
Loki,
awful.
I would eat
but
it. Maybe not
I
every
wouldn't eat it
day,
for like 2 weeks in a row. Yeah.
but I would probably eat it. She does seem to mention that they're not seasoning the mashed food, so maybe I really wouldn't eat it. But nonetheless, it doesn't sound that bad.
She does say that she had stopped seasoning his food with the medics 2 days ago. It would not do to have him too weak when he arrived in Bingtown. She smiled, pleased with herself, and sat down to her meal. He should rally briefly before he died. And so he calls out then, sickly and weakly, Serilla, are you there? And she's just says, yeah, I'm here. Wait until I'm done. And he's like, okay.
She specifically considers not answering and then is like, I should be nice to him because he's gonna die soon.
She decided to be kind and answers.
Decided to be kind by answering, although she does still make him wait till she leisurely finishes her meal.
She ate at her leisure. She had trained him to be patient. The servants were barred from his chamber, save once a day when they came to tidy. Under her particular supervision, she allowed him no other visitors. His health was far too delicate, she told him. It had not taken much effort to inflate his fears of death to a stultifying level. A substantial number of his party had died from this illness. Even Serilla had been appalled at the toll it had taken. She believed she was quite safe from whatever it had been, but she had filled the satrap's head with the idea that the disease still ran rampant on the ship. It had not been hard. The more she restricted his food and dosed him with poppy syrup, the more tractable he became. When his eyes were wide and wandering, whatever she told him became his truth. When she had first taken over caring for him, the others had been too ill to visit him, let alone intervene. Since they had recovered, she had successfully turned them back at the door. It was the satrap's order that he not be disturbed. Serilla had had the spacious chamber to herself, save for the bed the satrap occupied. She had been quite comfortable. So we learn here that, yes, as time has passed, others have died now, and it's been quite a high toll. But Serilla still believes it's just from the bad food, and other people seem to have gotten over it now, and it's been fine. But she has been keeping the satrap isolated, drugged, and underfed. So he is very easily agreeable to his captive at the moment,
Right.
and believes anything that she tells him.
Yeah,
She's going for it.
she is.
Going
And
a
it's
little
hard.
overboard here.
Yeah, it's hard because on the one hand, it's a little horrifying, but on the other hand, it's not like the satrap was a good person.
No, right. Like, he wasn't a good person, but it is horrifying what she is doing.
Yeah, for sure. She's really going to the extreme. And obviously, it's for that sense of control. It's for that sense of protection that she's giving herself. And I don't know, you can really tell that she has created her own narrative.
Yeah.
And she just is in this little bubble of, this is what's going to happen next. This is what we're doing. Everything is fine.
So she goes over to the satrap and studies him and thinks, perhaps I've gone too far. His skin was pallid, his face was almost skeletal from lack of flesh. The bony hands that rested atop the coverlet twitched from time to time. That was nothing new. His indulgence in pleasure drugs had done that to him years ago. It was only their feebleness that made them look like dying spiders, she decided. And she says, oh, you're looking so much better. Shall we get some food into you? Please. He smiled up at her fondly. He was convinced she was the only one who had stood by him, the only one he could rely on. She winces back from his foul breath, and he had complained yesterday that some of his teeth felt loose. Well, he would probably recover swiftly enough. Or not. He just had to live long enough to get her ashore in Bingtown and ingratiated with the traders. She did not want him to be so strong that he could contradict her account. Anything unfortunate that he said, she intended to attribute to his wandering mind. So she's just placating him, feeding him food like, oh, we'll be in Bingtown tomorrow. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
And in her mind thinking, well, all he has to do is be there, say that, yeah, she's part of my retinue, and then die. And she doesn't care.
Yeah. He just has to give her credibility. Mm-hmm. It's a little rough. I don't know. I feel very conflicted about it because he is a bad person and he doesn't treat other people like they're people, especially women. And what she had to deal with was horrendous, and it was nothing to him. He literally did not care. So it's really hard to be like, oh, she shouldn't do that to him. She should be nicer. Because it's kind of like, well, if he wanted people who liked him and were nice.
He's still a character in a book, right? You can still be like, ha ha.
Absolutely.
You got yours, fictional. Villain.
The fictional aspect makes it a lot easier to root for her in this instance.
So we caught up with them a little bit, but now we jump over to Ronica. And this is jumping right in the middle of, oh my gosh, there is an emergency meeting called for the old traders. This has not happened for a long time. What is going on? Right.
The bell is tolling, and it's really early morning / late night, depending. Mm-hmm. There are traders coming in both their night clothes and the clothes from the night before. So it's just this weird hour of the night.
Yeah, so all of them are like coming out. Of course, it's an emergency, so they don't bother dressing up for it or anything. Right. They're all rushing out. They get picked up by a wagon. Everyone's kind of driven or herded to the steps outside of the old traders' council's hall, where somebody is saying like, oh, it has to be the blood plague. You know, why else would they ring this? And there's a bunch of like fear mongering about different possibilities.
Right. I did want to touch on that part a little bit, because Ronica says she can't remember the last time the bell was rang. And then for people to be like, oh, obviously it's the blood plague being back. That was kind of weird, because it's like, well, if they rang it the first time.
I don't think they would have rang it the first time.
Okay. So maybe
I think it was such a devastating thing that just kind of a sickness swept through.
Right.
That if there was a second of count of it, then the emergency bell would be like, we got a problem.
Lock your back. Doors.
Smear the lamb's blood, you know?
Yes. So everybody's panicking. Nobody knows what's going on. And it's really interesting to see this from Ronica's perspective, because she's an adult and she really has this calmness about her. Clearly,
it's frantic writing.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot of Veronica's thoughts besides the first couple lines of like, can't recall when this had last happened. You know?
But I think that's why I feel like she's so calm.
Yeah.
Because it's more just observing the chaos around her.
Well, eventually Trader Larfa steps up and bellows for attention. He was the owner of the Liveship Winsome, a man usually steady to the point of dullness. This morning, his cheeks were glowing red with excitement. He says, I rang the bell. Listen to me, all of you. There isn't time to enter the hall and convene properly. I've already passed the word to every live ship in the harbor, and they've gone out to face them. Invaders, Chalcedean war galleys. My boy saw them at first light and came to wake me up. I sent him to the west wall to rouse the other live ships. I don't know how many galleys are out there, but it's more than 10. They mean business. So this is what people see in Bingtown, this huge escort of Chalcedean warships that are escorting the satrap, because it's all on Chalcedean ships, are coming to a foreign harbor, and everyone in Bingtown's like, the Chalcedeans have been on us for generations. Mm-hmm. This is war.
Right. Well, notably, I don't think anybody knew that the satrap was supposed to be coming to them. Like, I don't think they sent word ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned that with Devadra Start before, because he seemed like everything was cleaning up, and I still kind of think he does, but he doesn't speak up in this thing here. So,
and that's the weird part to me, that if there was notice sent, even just to the new traders,
Ronica doesn't mention him all, and usually she mentions him if he's at those meetings. So maybe he couldn't get his servants out of bed in time.
I guess maybe. I don't know.
Or no one woke him up.
Honestly, that's a funny thought. No, this scene is so interesting. I especially love the chaos that follows the announcement by Larfa about like, oh, how many are there? What's going on? And he's like, I don't know. I came here. Yeah, like, I told you what I know. I find that so funny because that's so real. But I did also want to quickly mention that Trader Larfa was the second person to offer to help bring Paragon out to the ocean or to the sea. So just in case anybody, that was not that long ago, 2 chapters ago, but I just thought that was cool that here he is again, and we get to know a little bit more detail about the captain of the Winsome.
It was last chapter, wasn't it?
No.
2 chapters ago?
Last chapter was about Kenneth.
Right. You're right. Well, all these questions are peppering in, and then they ask, what about our children? And the answer is, if they're old enough to tote a bucket, bring them with you. Leave the smallest ones here with the old and crippled. They'll have to look after each other. Come on. Selden, of course, has tears rolling down his cheeks, and his eyes were huge. Go into the concourse, Selden, Keffria told him in a falsely cheerful voice. We'll be back for you soon. Shan't, he declared in a brittle little voice. I'm big enough to carry a bucket. He took back a frightened sob and crossed his arms defiantly on his chest. Malta will be with you, Keffria offered desperately. She can help take care of the babies and old people. I'd rather carry a bucket, Malta declared sourly as she took Selden's hand in hers. For a moment she looked and almost sounded like Althea. We're not going to hide here and wonder what is going on. Come on, Selden, let's go. So Malta, of course, wants to help get down where the everything is going on.
Right. I do want to say that Selden is not beating the crying child allegations.
Oh no, he's just tears rolling down his cheeks.
Which, you know what? As a fellow crier, good for you, Selden. You can cry and still do it all.
What is he doing though?
Carrying a bucket of water.
Well, he says he wants to.
He's standing up and asserting his feelings, and that is important.
Oh, Selden.
But anyway, Malta is
compared to Althea here.
Yes, it is compared to Althea here, which I have been saying, I think.
Yeah, I think.
And so I think we all have, that they are very similar. They're just walking different paths. And especially with Ronica being like, whoa, that was almost like Althea. It really made me wonder, what if Malta got to be on a ship when she was young? Would she be more independent like Althea and less thinking of women in traditional roles? Or would she still think that there's a specific role for the woman? I feel like
she might. I mean, her interest doesn't seem to be in ships at all, so she might just not have taken to it. Maybe she'd be more independent, but I think she wouldn't be like I want to be a sailor kind of person.
Right. Well, I think she would have really liked the merchant aspect.
Yeah,
I think she really likes people and the like manipulation and relationships between people.
Yeah, I could see that.
I don't know. But yeah, you're right. She probably wouldn't enjoy the sailor aspect as much.
Well, there's still questions, obviously, and Larfa is trying to direct people still after those questions have been shouted out, and he says, get word to the 3 ships' families, someone take word to the new Traders' Council. And we can see division still in an emergency setting like this, because somebody shouts and says, as if they would care, let them watch out for themselves. It's their fault we have Chalcedeans in the harbor in the first place, someone else shouts. And Lurfa speaks up for the good of all Bingtown, saying that there's no time for that. Bingtown is what counts, not when, like, it's not when we got here. It's our city all together. We all need to stand
Right.
together for this. So they take up a cry for Bingtown, and people start heading out.
Yeah. To be fair, I am on the side of the guy who's like, let the new traders take care of themselves. Mostly because they brought in slavery. And I'm feeling like, that's on them. They can figure it out. But also, you don't really want them messing up your plans. So I guess it's better to make sure everybody knows what's going on. Also, I want to know, how did nobody else run to the traders building? Because they're ringing a really loud bell. Clearly, everyone in town can hear it. So how is it literally only the traders meeting up? Because that bell hasn't rung since Veronica can remember. Why wouldn't people be curious and just go see what's going on?
Yeah, maybe there are some on the outskirts.
That's
Who
fair.
knows?
But I guess, would Veronica care to tell us? No,
Yeah.
probably not. Not in this situation. But I guess it is good that they're like, let's make sure we tell other people and not just, we'll take care of it. That's,
Right.
Good for them, I guess.
Oh, also, I think later on in the chapter, I was thinking more about the Devad thing. He's on one of the ships that meets them, and
Yes.
they've already mentioned that all the live ships have left. So I think he was down there already. So that's why I think he knows as well. He made himself like
ready
be available
that day.
Yeah, so he could meet the people out there.
Okay.
But anyways, Veronica's looking around and seeing, women and daughters matter-of-factly ripping up their skirts so they can march after their husbands and brothers more easily. And they catch a cart ride down, and there's an excitement in the air, obviously. And they catch this cart, and there's 3 young men who leaped in after them. One had a pitted sword at his hip. They were all grinning like maniacs. Their eyes were bright, their movements swift and powerful like young bulls ready to challenge one another. They smiled wide at Malta, who glanced at them and looked aside. The cart started with a jolt, and Veronica seized hold of the edge. They began the trip down to Bingtown. So everything is kind of exciting for this young generation, and we've seen rumblings of that with Reyn and Grag a little bit, organizing things with, especially next book, I believe, a lot of the younger generation is part of that kind of revolutionary mindset and wants to free themselves of everything. And I believe his name is Road Karn or something, who kind of attaches himself to Serilla and is like the dangerous young man that Malta talks about early in this book. He's like part of that younger generation, and they're all trying to like gain power and stuff, and they see this fighting attitude here, this fight ahead of them, and they're like, this is our chance.
Yeah.
So everything's kind of I view it through Veronica's eyes here as she's kind of like, oh, this is just going to go horribly no matter what happens. And she's looking around and seeing these young men kind of excited.
Yeah. And there's definitely that sense of, again, the naivety, I think, of young people to just grasp onto this is an adventure and we get to act on all those things we've been talking about. And like the Chalcedeans are these big enemy that have been demonized probably all these kids' lives. So of course they're excited to finally get to fight them and show them who's boss. And not really, I don't think there's any sense of them thinking to, a lot of people could die. And this, if it is a fight, it's not going to be easy and not everybody's going to come out. And even if they do survive, there's going to be so much wreckage and so much hurt after. And it's just that sense of adventure, I think, at this point of like, something's happening. And like you said, they're excited to capitalize on that. And they've been talking, and I feel like this generation is really excited about the politics of, we could become independent, we could be our own nation, like this is so cool, and here it is, we've been talking all this time and we get to do more action. I don't know, I think it's really interesting too that they have that. And I like the little stream of naivety in different ways
Right.
throughout this chapter.
I want to think, before we move on with the next part, I think I'm kind of thinking ahead to the Rainwild Chronicles.
Yeah.
I believe Hest would be around that same age, like the younger 20s right now. Because I think in the Rainwild Chronicles, he's 30s.
Okay, yeah.
So I think like he's, you know, maybe mid 20s now, kind of in that revolutionary stage. And Cedric is probably maybe around Serwyn's age-ish, like 19. These are guesses, obviously.
Right.
And I think Alice would be like 16 or something like that.
So she's like around Malta's age, a little older.
I think older than Malta, but not by much. I don't remember her age exactly. And we'll get to that obviously in, 4 years or something. But yeah, I want to think that at least Hest is kind of around that kind of things are happening age right now. That revolutionary kind of, we have it because I know Rainwild Chronicles fleshes out a little bit more of society from a different point of view than the Vestrits, who remove themselves from that.
Right.
And the Trells, who Brashen is forcibly removed from that. So we don't see much of their society until a little bit of views through Alice, Cedric, and Hest.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I think the views we get right now are more critical of society, although there is criticism through the other views in the Rainwild Chronicles for sure. I think it's more overall accepting because it's, like you said, something they participate in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a good point.
The Vestrits are poor, so they're very far removed from those parties and gatherings and things that Malta wants to be a part of.
Right.
So
yeah, that is a good point to think about where these other characters are at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. They also could be younger because
they could be. Yeah.
I don't know how much time is between now and then. It's really hard because the next time we see like Althea and Brashen, they have a child that's like 5, but it takes a long time to have a baby, like it doesn't necessarily happen right away. And I don't know. I don't know.
I think there is like you can piece and puzzle together a time skip or a time jump.
Right.
Of about how many years? Because I think they mention, seasons that the dragons are there.
Right.
But I haven't done it yet, so.
That's fair. And to be fair, with the next trilogy through Fitz's point of view, I don't really think those books are more than a few years. I don't think it's like 10 years represented in the book. So I don't know.
But anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring that up as a touchstone.
Yes.
But as they're driving this cart down to Bingtown, they see a clearing, and there's a ship out there that is flying the Jamalian standard. Another of the young men says that doesn't mean anything. The cowardly buggers just want to get in close before they attack, and Ronica silently agrees with that. And she sees a sickly smile bloom on Malta's face and asks her if she's all right. She feared her granddaughter was about to faint. Malta laughed a thin, near-hysterical sound. It's so stupid. All this week I've been sewing on my dress, thinking about rain and the flowers and lights and dancing. Last night I could not sleep because my slippers displeased me so. And now I've a feeling that none of it may ever come to be. She looks over everything. She spoke with a quiet fatalism. Everything in my life that I was sure I would do someday has always been snatched away when it was almost within my reach. Perhaps it will happen again. A far look came into her eyes. Perhaps by tomorrow we shall all be dead and our town a smoking ruin. Perhaps my presentation will never even be. Don't say such things, Kefria exclaimed in horror. Ronica said nothing at all for a time, then she set her hand over Malta's where she gripped the side of the cart. This is today, and this is your life. They were comfortless words, and she was not sure where they came from. It is my life also, she added, and looked ahead of them, far down the winding road to Bingtown.
Am I the only one who read that and was like, thanks? Okay, Ronica. I mean, don't get me wrong.
I mean, she knows they're comfortless. She knows that they're not actually doing anything. She's just like, that's it. That's what we got.
This is life, baby.
I can't lie to you.
That's fair enough. And I get it. Like, she's not wrong. You know what I mean? And it is a good way to look at things of like, well, you can't really hope for better or dream about the what ifs because this is life and that's what you got.
Right.
So I get it, but also reading it, okay, thanks. I guess that's my take, but I do feel a little bad for Malta here. I think we get to see she is acting her age, which is good.
Yeah, I like this view of her actually because it shows the mix of fatalism and maturity that we have seen flashes from her, but also that like kid mentality still.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I do like it a lot. I also like the sneaky little, I was thinking of Reyn in there because I don't think this is an act. I don't think that she is manipulating this scenario so she can put on a show.
Yeah.
She is dramatic and she does love a good book moment where she can be like, oh, I'm a damsel. But I don't think this is in-depthly planned. I don't think.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see that she is thinking about Reyn. So maybe there are some deeper feelings there that she hasn't necessarily acknowledged to herself.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that. And I think we both agree that there are. But she doesn't want there to be because it's not like in the stories, right?
Right. And he might be an ugly monster.
Speaking of, though.
The ugly monster.
Speaking of the ugly monster, we
The
jump over.
Yeah. No, that's David Restart.
With his wattles of flesh. But Reyn is standing on deck of the Kendry, another live ship. And remember, this is a few weeks, probably, after maybe a week or two after he talked to his mother and had that whole deal go down. So he can have travel privileges to his beloved.
Although, does he really get it? Because he's going for the summer ball, which was always the plan.
Yeah, but I think he's going a little bit early too.
Okay.
You know? And it's not with his family, which they would all be going to.
Fair enough.
The thing as well. So
yeah. Also, maybe more importantly, this is the Kendry, which is the hot one. The first ever live ship, but also the hot one, because that's what I think Althea said
not
about
the first ever.
Oh, you're right. The first known live ship to the old traders, right?
I thought that was Ringsgold.
Oh, maybe I confuse a lot of these.
Kendry was the one who you likened to Barrel Guy, I think, because he was kind of rude to Paragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess I thought I was confused. But I also, when I first started reading this, thought that Kendry was the one that is in the Rainwild Chronicles. But the
Tarman, the raft.
I thought this was the Tarman. I don't know why.
No, that's the first ever.
Yes, that's the very first live ship. But I, for some reason, thought that this was the Tarman, and I was like, sick. No, it's Kendry, the hot one, Barrel Guy, aka Barrel Guy.
The very charismatic, affable one, and makes a joke with everybody.
Yes.
But he's on deck of this live ship heading down towards Bingtown, and it is carrying them down the river at an incredible rate. So he's kind of trying to calm himself. He's trying to lift the heaviness from his heart, he says, but it would not go away. He's very down this chapter, this section.
Yeah, well, to be fair, he's also very sleep deprived.
Yes. Sliding his hands up under his veil, he scrubbed at his sandy eyes. Deep sleep seemed like a nursery tale from his childhood. He wondered if he would ever sleep well again. "You look like I feel," a voice said quietly. Reyn startled and turned, and there is Grag Tenira. "But you shouldn't," he continued. "Are you not to be Malta Vestrit's escort at the summer ball? What is there to sigh about in that?" "Very little," Reyn assured him. He plastered a smile onto his face. "I share her concerns for her father and their missing ship. That is all, but it is a heavy concern. I had hoped that her presentation ball would be a wholly festive occasion. I fear this will overshadow it." "If it's any comfort, the Kendry brought me word that the rescue expedition has already left Bingtown." "Ah, I heard your name linked with Althea Vestrit's. this word comes directly from her then? And Reyn saw Greg fold a little scroll of parchment into his sleeve or his pocket or whatever, and
Right.
he nods at that, and Greg confirms, and he's like, yeah, it was a farewell missive. She has hopes for her expedition, but none at all for us. It's a very friendly letter. Ah, sometimes friendly is harder than cold.
How would you know? Sorry.
Because he's a young man in a very wealthy, aristocratic family who has been schooled to manners and courtesy, and he can he's good at conversation.
I guess. Maybe his brother dealt with it.
Yeah, true. Exactly, Grag says and rubs his forehead. The Vestrits are a stiff-necked bunch. The women are too damn independent for their own good, so everyone has always said of Veronica Vestrit. I've discovered the hard way that same is true of Althea. He gave Reyn a bitter grin. Let's hope your luck with the younger generation is better. She gives little sign of that, Reyn admitted ruefully, but I think that if I can win her, the battle will have been worth it. Greg shook his head and looked away. I felt the same way about Althea. I still feel that way. Somehow I'll doubt that I'll get the chance to find out. He's very bitter about the letter right now.
He is very bitter, but also I hate that he's like, ugh, independent women, gross. My guy.
Okay. Yes, it is bad to hear that, but he just had like kind of confirmation of rejection because, hear me out.
I'm listening.
You were about to, you're about to go off. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, okay?
Okay.
I understand.
And why does the devil need advocating for it?
because he's a character in a book and we're doing a dissection of it.
Okay, fine.
The bitterness from this rejection is right now. He just finished reading it, and he's rejected because of her independence.
Yeah.
So that's where the source of his anger comes from, and he can direct it at that and be like, I can't have the love of my life because she thinks she has to do this on her own and is independent. So again, I agree with you. It's kind of gross to read that when he says that, but as a character, I can see where he's coming from.
Okay. Well, I just want to say I don't like it, and it confirms my suspicions that Grag Tanira is a nice guy TM.
Yeah, I mentioned that to you too.
Yeah,
I called him a nice guy.
Yeah. No, he is. I don't know.
He's a traditional old trader family right now.
Yes.
Right? He's just, that's his society. That's what he is. He's kind of our picturesque view of that.
Right.
His father, Tomi Tanira, is like the perfect, slightly older generation old trader.
Mm-hmm.
Great trader, very independent, strong in his morals, and his son takes after him and has the same view as the majority of Bingtown.
Right.
They're kind of the model that we are given by Hobb.
Right. Although I will say he's a little bit more progressive because he would have let Althea be on the ship with him.
That's why I say that he is kind of the model that Hobb gives us for like the standard old town trader, because we have extremes. We have like the Vadrastart and like the new traders, and we have the extreme of like the Vestrits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the middle ground of like, we were founded on ideals of independence and stubbornness and everything. And yes, we're shadowed by the patriarchal, like women need coddling kind of thing. But I can still accept that women can do jobs. That's kind of like the middle line to Nira.
Yeah, middle line to Nira. Yeah, I don't know. It is just really frustrating, I think, especially because I think at one point said that he likes Althea because she's different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And then to turn around and be like, I can't believe she's so different from everybody else. It's like, yeah.
Didn't know how different she was. Well, it just goes to show, like, we talked about this too when he was pining after her, like, I danced with you like years ago or whatever. That's your basis for your love. You know?
Yeah. Good point. I
didn't really know her.
No. And it's really easy to have a crush on somebody you don't know and to like have a few good conversations and be like, oh, they're the love of my life. Like, I get it. Loverboy has heartache right now, whatever. It just is, I think, disappointing because of how much I like Greg as a character. Yeah. And then to have him be like, still a
They're
little bit
too independent for their own good.
yeah,
Even Ronica.
hate an independent woman. Like,
Well,
okay.
that also confirms kind of what we haven't talked about for a while since probably
Mhm.
the first one is that Ronica was also the talk of the town for a while as being a
Yeah.
head of a household and directing finances and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that she is breaking roles, gender roles and societal roles just by being in charge. But she's doing it really well, and even with her husband gone, nobody is like letting her just not be in charge anymore, I guess. Like
Right. I mean, yeah, that
they're allowing her to continue her role that she has chosen for herself, which
mhm.
is, I think, pretty big. But
Well,
no,
Efren told her to do it. He's
yeah,
like, I
I
can't
mean,
be bothered. You do it. You're better. So
yeah, but I think the fact that nobody was like, okay, well, now it's Kyle, which also
right.
could be part of why nobody is taking away her authority because Kyle's the other option. But it
Or
is
Kefria. God forbid. Saw forbid.
saw forbid. No, but it reading Greg, I think it just again underlines how he and Althea were not meant to be. They're
Mhm.
not a very good match above a superficial level. He would balance her in some ways, but it just
It
ultimately
would have to be a different story, but they would be a perfect match in that different story. You
right,
know?
exactly. If she wasn't pushing too hard against gender roles and her role in society, they would be perfect for each other, but that's not who Althea is, and that's not the book we're reading. So anyway, we just get to continue hearing Greg bemoan the fact that he was dumped again.
But Greg is still on the run, and he's still being looked for because he just kind of says, like, I can't really tell you where I'm going, Reyn. Sorry, even though you're politely asking after that, and your family has shown us so much support, and that's amazing. But,
Right.
you know, secret is a secret.
Right. And, you know, Reyn takes that really well.
Yeah.
I do want to say that Greg specifically says he's staying on the Kendry until they get out to the ocean. He's not going to get out at all, which
Right.
is when Reyn asks, where are you going after that? But there's no secret. He's not telling the secret.
Yeah.
Where do you think he would have gone?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I think that's the weird part to me. Why does it need to be a secret unless there is a bigger plan?
I mean, his dad already left.
Yeah,
They left long before, like, the Paragon, so maybe to meet up with them.
sure. But then why wouldn't Reyn be able to know that he was meeting up with his dad and his family? You know what I mean? Like,
So it wasn't spread about. I don't know.
yeah,
Secret is a secret, I guess.
I guess. I don't know.
I mean, the way that it's phrased here is he gave a friendly smile but shook his head dumbly, and then Reyn's like, oh, yeah, quite right. The fewer who know, the better. So it's just like Greg probably wants to tell him because, like, he doesn't see the harm in it, but fewer who know, the better. You know?
but it's like, wouldn't a pretty logical leap be he's going to meet up with his dad? That's why I feel
maybe,
like.
but where? That's,
Oh, okay.
He's asking, where are you going? You know?
I guess. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So
Also, where is he going?
Reyn does, after Greg thanks his family for standing up with him, Reyn shrugs and says, it is a time when the Reyn Wilds and Bingtown must stand united or give up who and what we are. Greg stared at the ship's white-edged wake. Do you think enough of us will stand united for us to succeed? For generations, we have functioned as part of Jamalia. All of our lives are patterned as closely as possible on Jamalia City. It is not just our language and our ancestry. It is all our customs, our food, our style of dress, even our dreams for our futures. When we stand apart from that and say, we are Bingtown, what will we be really saying? Who will we be? Reyn concealed his impatience. What did it matter? He tried to formulate a more political answer. I think we will simply be recognizing the reality of the last 3 or 4 generations. We are the folk of the cursed shores. We are the descendants of those brave enough to come here. They made sacrifices and we inherited their burdens. I don't resent that, but I won't share my birthright with those who will not make the same commitment. I won't cede my place to people who don't recognize what it cost us.
I do feel like this is a little bit of a weird take from Greg, but maybe not. I don't. Just to ask, what are we without Jamalia or Jamalia? Bingtown? Like, I know that Jamalia founded them, or their like ancestors are from Jamalia, but I just, I don't know. It's odd to me because I feel like Bingtown has its own very specific culture of being traders, that
Mm,
I like the fact that he, as an old trader, wouldn't see that as their own thing is odd to me, but maybe that's just because of my own personal bias. I don't know.
I really like this paragraph and these questions from Greg actually, because it kind of gives us more of an insight into who he is, in
Mhm.
my opinion. Because we see it a little bit. He's a very thoughtful person. He's a very thoughtful character, sailor,
Right.
and this shows that he's actually considering the identity of their culture,
Okay.
which is something that people don't do in this book besides him.
Right.
Really. And Reyn even brushes it aside because he has other things on his mind. He's like,
Right.
what does it matter? We're going to be who we are. Right. But Greg is like, everything that we have ever done has been heavily influenced by Jamalia because Malta always talks about the latest fashions from Jamalia.
Fair
That's
enough. Yeah.
always flooding the street. And it continues like that after this trilogy too, because they come to a good agreement, right?
Right.
And the scales, from the
Mhm.
Elderlings come out as fashion, whatever. But Greg is like, if we fully divest ourselves from Jamalia, we are our own country or whatever, we rule
Mhm.
ourselves. What do we do then? Where do we go as a culture? Who do we look to? Or are we developing it ourselves? Because we always have gotten everything from Jamalia.
Mhm.
Our next fashions, our next food trends, we trade with them and get their delicacies that are up and coming and the new
Right.
expensive things. What happens to us after that? Are we still Jamalia light? Are we going to create our own thing? So that's where I'm going with it, where Greg is kind of thinking on who the identity or what the identity of Bingtown will be. Yeah, sure, they have the trader thing and they have that. And that's part of the culture, but not like, that's more of like an attitude of who they are rather than actual pop culture
Okay.
of a city, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
Like, where does their entertainment come from? Are they going to have artists flock to them to create new things?
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I guess maybe the way I was thinking about it is more like, I don't know, a lot of big cities and international cities influence the way smaller cities work and pop culture as at large. And that doesn't mean that like people in New York who follow French fashion are don't have their own unique culture. Like they still have a very distinct culture. And I guess that's not fair because New York is really big. But like France is the fashion capital of the world, right? Paris.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I
I guess
mean,
Paris Fashion Week is what I'm thinking of. But
yeah, there's a lot. New York, Paris, Milan.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like people taking inspiration from that or following those trends all over the world doesn't make them Paris light, you know?
Right, but you have to think about in terms of modern day, it is so much more accessible to take those ideas or whatever. If you're in an era with one ship or like a couple ships every couple months, whatever,
Right.
and you bring over those things, that is a dominating trend for a long time.
Right.
That's
I mean,
yeah.
but even if you think about like colonial times
Mhm.
and like in America when we became independent, I'm sure we were still influenced by British fashion and fashion happening in Europe whenever it would get to us months later. But
It's an interesting topic because
yeah,
maybe I'm sure it's probably divisive back then too, but there were probably people who, after we declared independence, thought that you were a traitor if you were dressing in British fashion.
maybe.
So, like,
Yeah.
there's probably nuances to those things, and I think Greg is just kind of wondering what's going to come about of all of these little things in our culture, our
That's fair.
city.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I think maybe this is just one of those things that doesn't resonate with me as somebody who I don't know. I feel like I have a very strong belief in every little pocket of people has their own culture and really contributes to society in that way. Like it's a personal belief. And so I'm
Yeah.
just kind of like, well, what do you mean you guys don't have like, yeah, you're influenced by them. That doesn't mean you're an exact copy. I don't know. So I think it's just like also coming from that where I'm reading this as like, come on, Greg, like, have you
Right.
lived in your town ever? And you've been to Jamalia, you know, they're different, but I don't know. So I think that's where I'm coming from, where I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I don't like this, but hearing your point of view, it makes more sense of that more underlying question of there's a big change happening and what happens after that I don't think was getting just from my own personal read.
Yeah, he even says, even our dreams for our futures come from Jamalia. Like,
Yeah.
what happens then? You know, like if we divest from Jamalia, are those dreams no longer good because that was the evil that we left from? Or
Right, right.
yeah, I think
That's
it's
a good point.
big change for the future. He doesn't really know what's going to happen. And Reyn is just like, oh my gosh,
Who cares?
stop talking about that. You know, I won't share my birthright with those who will not make the same commitment as our ancestors did, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And he glances at Grag after that speech, expecting him to agree easily. Instead, the man only looked troubled. In a low voice, as if ashamed of the thought, Grag asked him, have you never thought of just kicking it all over and running away? For a moment, Reyn just stared at him through his veil. Then he observed wryly, obviously, you've forgotten whom you are speaking to. Grag gave a lopsided shrug. I've heard you could pass if you wanted to. As for me, sometimes when I'm away from my ship for a while, I find myself wondering, what holds me here? Why do I stay in Bingtown? Why must I be all a trader's son must be? Some folk have kicked over the traces. Rash and Trell, for instance.
Before we get into that, I wanted to point out when I'm away from my ship for a while, I start wondering,
I know.
why do I have to
I have
be
that
here?
highlighted too.
Yeah.
What holds me here?
So this again points to that two-way
It's not just the
bond.
ships who are held there,
right?
and are solely slaves of the family that comes aboard them. The families themselves are influenced to take that tradition and be a part of that family and do that exact same thing.
Exactly. And we have talked about this through Wintrow's point of view, because Wintrow talked about how he's talked a lot about how whenever he goes off of Vivacia, he feels like his head clears and he doesn't understand why he is so obsessed with her.
Right.
And then he comes back and it gets cloudy again. And there's just that loyalty that is there. And so we talked about that a little bit. And I think we were wondering how much of that is Wintrow and Vivacia reaching for him, and how much of that is just Liveship and how they work. And I feel like this is a really good example of maybe it is the Liveship influencing the families.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a fun little thing that Hobb did there.
And it also could be, most likely, I think it's the generations that have gone into the Liveship that are kind of using their influence on their future family member,
Sure,
their descendants, because that is the Liveship's personality and influence. It's like a culmination of all their family together being like, you are a traitor's son, sail us.
It could be something to do too with the blood aspect, because that seems to be really important. The bloodline,
just that
calling,
connection.
like to like and all that.
But yeah, it's a very similar thought process that Vivacia and Paragon went through, years ago for
Right.
Paragon. But Vivacia went through is just like, when Wintrow was away for a while, I got to thinking.
Yeah. So I don't know. So anyway, we can go back to the rest of the stuff, which is now Grag is bringing up
Brashen.
Yeah.
We get Greg's point of view here is just like Brashen, kicked off all traces and left.
Yeah, which also I just want to say, I was so hyped to read this part because I think it's really exciting to get a sort of third-party view of Brashen.
And we've gotten it from Greg before, where he is upset because Brashen is, close with Althea, and we get
Right.
it in this too, that he thinks that Brashen took advantage of Althea,
Right.
and he's been warned about Brashen, but doesn't really know him. But
Right.
in this context, yeah, it's almost truly unbiased third person.
Yeah, I think what I like more about this take is it's not connected to Althea's honor.
Right.
And so
right.
it's nice to get that point of view in a way that he's not being influenced to say this because it's a girl in front of him and he needs to protect her. This
Right.
is to somebody he sees as an equal partner who can know all of the little details that he knows.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important. And it's really cool they get to see how probably most of the traders view Brashen, at least the people in his age bracket, whether or not they know him.
Yeah. So Reyn says, I don't believe I know him. No, you wouldn't, and you never will. His family disowned him for his wild ways. When I heard about that, I halfway expected him to die from it. But he didn't. He comes and goes as he pleases. He lives where he wants, sails where the wind blows him. He's free. Is he happy? He's with Althea. Greg shook his head. Somehow the family picked him to captain the Paragon for them, and they entrusted him with Althea. From what I've heard of Althea, she needs no man's protection. She would agree with that, Greg sighed. I don't. I think Trell has deceived her in the past, and may again. It eats at me. But do I rush off to find her and bring her back? Did I leap in and say, I'll go, I'll captain your mad ship for you so long as I can be with you? No, I didn't, and Trell did. And that's another difference between us.
I first of all cannot forgive Greg for making me be on Reyn's side of a conversation. First and foremost. But second of all, really don't like this side of Greg. I think it's really important that Greg is kind of idealizing and maybe idolizing a little bit Brashen and Brashen's life.
Oh, definitely, because he's free and it's no
Gets
problems.
to do whatever he wants. He's so happy, which is hilarious.
Well, he doesn't say that he's happy, just
no.
say he's with Althea. So.
Yeah.
Implying that should make him happy.
Mm-hmm. No, but I think it is really apt of Reyn to ask, well, is he happy? Because it doesn't really matter if you're free if you're not happy, right? And that's the important part. We know Brashen's miserable, and
most of the time, at least.
Most of the time. Yeah. He's miserable and he's struggling with addiction and he really doesn't feel like he has his life together. I think when he was under Vivacia, he was the first mate on Vivacia, things were different, and maybe then you could say he's free and happy or whatever, which even then, I guess, are you really free if you have a stable job? But this whole idealization from Greg of, wow, he just gets to do whatever he wants and his life is so great and he got the girl and I'm being a proper trader's son and what do I have? It's like, okay, cry me a river. Also, I don't know. I don't feel like Althea can take care of herself. Not what you told her, but cool. Ugh.
He's also really hard on himself in this too.
Yeah.
And very self-critical and still, I think he feels cowardly.
Yeah.
Because he didn't volunteer himself. He didn't.
Right.
He probably feels self-centered a bit of just like, I didn't do anything that Brashen did because I'm protecting myself here. And he's with Althea, so why couldn't I do that?
Right. I think I appreciate him for admitting there were things that he could have done if he really wanted Althea.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit misplaced. And I don't think it was cowardly of him personally.
No, I don't think
it was
so
more,
either.
it just didn't align with his goals or his wants and needs, which is not nice to Althea, but it's not bad. It's not inherently wrong or evil to have unaligned views and goals. That's normal. People all the time have different goals. I think it's hard here because he's equating Brashen being there for Althea with the reason Althea is with him. And that's, I guess maybe partially correct, but I don't think that's all of it. I think
Oh, no, of course not.
there's definitely a deeper connection there. And he does sort of try to play this whole, it's all Brashen's doing. Brashen is forcing himself forcing himself on Althea, and she's just this helpless woman who has no choice but to choose him because he's there. Whereas it's not that at all. And so that's also very frustrating to read.
Reyn scratched at the back of his neck. Was something growing there?
Ew.
Says, I think you make a fault of what is actually a virtue, Grag. You know your duty, and you are doing it. It isn't your fault if Althea can't appreciate that. That's just the trouble, Grag says. She does. She praised me for it and wished me well. She said she admires me. It's a poor substitute for love. Reyn could think of nothing to say to that. And Greg sighs and kind of calls it a day. He's like, well, no point in dwelling on any of that now. If it comes to war with the satrap, it will come soon enough. Either Althea will come back to me, or she won't. It seems there is little I can do about my life. I'm like a leaf caught in a current. He shook his head and grinned in embarrassment at his own melancholy words. I'm going forward to talk to Kendry for a while. You coming? No, Reyn says. And then he adds, I think I've got some thinking of my own to do. Oh, morose Grag. Heartbroken boy.
Yeah. Also, back to not liking Reyn. So thanks, I guess, to Greg.
He's comforting his boy.
He is, like, oh, she can't see that you're 1 in a million. That's on her, which fair. I think we've all been there for a friend who is going through a breakup and you're like, they're horrible. They don't deserve you. You're amazing.
You're just doing
loss.
your job, and it's her fault if she can't see it.
It just so happens that I personally like Althea more than I like Greg. So I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. He is the one in loss. He is right. But no, it is a sweet little interaction where Reyn's trying. And I think it's interesting that they have gotten somewhat close in kind of a short amount of time. Again, where
somewhat close.
A Hobb book, time is relative. We don't really know how long anything is. I guess I don't really know. But last time we saw them, they hadn't even met or had seen Reyn. They had not even met yet in a capacity where they were talking. And now they're comforting each other on their woes. So a lot has happened in a short amount of time. And also, much more has happened that is outside of Reyn and Grag's relationship. And that has to do with the dragons and Titanglia.
Yeah, but we will have to get to that in the next episode, I think. It's a decent place to stop, right in the middle of Reyn's point of view here. Got a bit to finish up the chapter, but we got a lot to talk about yet. So we'll kind of leave it at the interpersonal issues and as the title states, the convergence on Bingtown here with all of the Chalcedean ships with Serilla and the satrap coming in and Ronica, Kefria, and Malta all thinking it's a battle.
Right.
Well, I guess we'll end it there. If you have any thoughts you want to mention to us, any theories, any, maybe thoughts about Reyn and Greg's conversation here.
Maybe some Greg hate mail you'd want to send in.
Yeah. Emma will love to read that. So please let us know. It is fitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can message us directly on any of our social medias. We're at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or you can comment on any of the posts that we post on any of those as well. Oh, also Threads. Forgot to mention that one.
Yes.
So yeah, go to our website. We have a link tree on there. Rate, review us. We appreciate all of those. Share it with your friends, your family, anyone who has read the books. And we look forward to hearing from you.
See you next week.